So as you just saw in that report, the right has united in Alberta. That's where we begin this week's Sunday Scrum. Joining me today from Ottawa is freelance columnist Susan Riley and John Ibbitson of the Globe and Mail, and Rob Breckenridge of News Talk 770 in Calgary. And Rob also writes a regular political column for the Calgary Herald. So Rob, then it only seems appropriate to begin with you, since you're joining us from Calgary. We've seen this uniting of the right playing very successfully federally. You'll of course remember when the Conservative Party merged with the Reform Party, that eventually led to 10 years of power for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And presumably in Alberta, it would be much easier for the Conservatives to just walk back into the provincial legislature. Is this just basically a done deal?
Well, there's still some challenges for this process. But look, I mean, when Jason Kenney first came back to Alberta and provincial politics, he laid out this what seemed like a really ambitious plan to win the leadership of the PC, unite the right, and then win the leadership of that new party. And he's accomplished 2 steps of that here. So this is a very interesting development. Going into this, people weren't quite sure what level of support there would be. So to see both the PCs and the Wildrose vote 95% in favor of this merger suggests that there's a lot of enthusiasm about this. And so questions about whether there would be, bitter people in either party opposed to this that might go their own way, try to set up a new party. I think this kind of overwhelming mandate really quells that. And I guess the question going forward is, especially for the PC party, are there going to be members of that party who decide that they don't want to be part of this? They don't want to join forces with the Wildrose. Are they going to be looking for a more centrist option? Because that exists in Alberta. There's something called the Alberta Party, and there have been some former PCs already who have been pushing for kind of a unite the center movement, maybe even around the Alberta Party. So things could still get interesting in Alberta politics.
Well, that's where, John, I was wondering if you could chime in a bit, because 95%, I mean, it sounds like, okay, everyone's pretty happy with this, but there has been some concern expressed by some centrist conservatives who are concerned about their Wildrose members and that they represent a degree of social conservatism that they may not feel comfortable with. And assuming if Jason Kenney becomes the next leader of this united party, how does he address that concern while keeping everybody under the same umbrella?
Well, first of all, beware columnists in Ottawa who presume to speak about provincial matters. Secondly, I think Brian Jean would take some exception to the notion that Jason Kenney is a shoo-in to become leader of the party. But it seems to me that the Albertans are facing 2 choices. I don't anticipate a Unite the Centre movement. If the province is anything like the federal scene, there will be some disgruntled voices. You remember that Joe Clark refused to join the new party and sat as an independent, but that all quickly went away. People made their choices, and if politics follows the normal path in Alberta, they'll make their choices there as well. The real question is, does Alberta fall into the pattern of Western provinces, or does it continue to go its own way? For decades now, the Western provinces have alternated between some form of Conservative Party and the NDP, from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and BC. Alberta, however, since the Depression, has had only Conservative parties up until Rachel Notley. So the real choice for Albertans, I guess, is going to be, do they return to the decades-long tradition of electing only one form of Conservative Party or another, or do they start alternating back and forth between the Conservatives and the NDP like the other provinces? That'll be the interesting question to watch from this great distance.
Susan, what do you think, once we do have a leader for this United Conservative Party, what do you think they'll be focusing on as they go after Rachel Notley and the NDP?
Oh boy, there's a whole range of things, starting, I'm sure, with energy policy and the carbon tax. I have 2 reactions to what happened, though. First of all, one trivial, I lament the disappearance of the Wildrose as a name of a political party. The United Conservative Party sounds like a moving company or something. Wildrose had such a distinct flavor, and it really said Alberta, and it's too bad that name has been ditched. Second of all, I'll be very curious to know who emerges out of this as Stephen Harper and who is going to be Peter MacKay. And my guess, I mean, who knows? I mean, I think most people expect Jason Kenney to emerge as the leader ultimately, but there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before then. Kenny's main advantage, it strikes me, having watched him for years in Ottawa, is that he basically works 24/7. He's all politics all the time. He's got a prodigious work ethic. He's intelligent. He's articulate in both official languages, by the way. Brian Jean is no slouch himself. He is, of course, leading a significantly larger caucus within the Alberta legislature. Rob's far better placed than we are to say who's going to win that contest. But I wouldn't be surprised if Brian Jean ends up, going back to his family and his private interests.
Rob, I want to give the final word to you, because last night we heard Brian Jean saying Alberta is done apologizing for our industries and our way of life. So two things. What exactly do you think he means by Alberta's way of life? And do you feel that Albertans have felt like they've been apologizing all this time?
Well, I'm not sure if there's that sense necessarily, but I think there's a perception out here that the current government has failed to really champion the energy sector, right? And obviously it's been a rough couple of years, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. Certainly commodity prices is a big factor. So I think there's a perception as well that, next door in Saskatchewan, you got a Premier in Brad Wall who's done exactly that, who's been a very vocal champion for industry, and on top of that, a very vocal opponent of any form of a carbon tax. So I think that's what Brian Jean's referring to, and I think that's going to loom large in what you hear from this new Conservative Party. I mean, it's obviously there's some questions, and if not a carbon tax, then what exactly? They're going to have to hammer out some policy, but it's something that's still here in Alberta is very unpopular. And if you want to target something that the NDP has been responsible for, that's top of the list. I think for the NDP's perspective, though, they would rather turn the page and have a conversation about social issues. And as we've seen already, both with Brian Jean and Jason Kenney, there's a tendency to get tripped up on some of those issues. I think the NDP is hoping that come 2019, if the economy's recovered sufficiently, maybe some of these issues are diffused a little bit. And I think they would rather fight an election over some of these more social issues.
Okay.
Can I just say, too, Natasha, that if the Conservatives do win, it causes incredible mischief for Justin Trudeau and his whole carbon tax plan, which was posited on Rachel Notley's plan. If that goes, and there are good signs it will go, it's just more trouble after the BC election for Trudeau and his pipelines, and for the whole pushing oil idea.
Well, let's see how things develop once they've got a new leader. We do have to take a quick pause, but there's lots more ahead with our Sunday Scrum, including the latest in the ongoing Umar Khadr controversy.